So
I think people are seeing us, by the way. This meeting is being live streamed. Yes.
So that's me now. I've just done that bit. So we won't swear anymore now.
Yeah, don't swear. They say they're hearing us.
But we shouldn't. Oh, we are live. There we go. It's working on YouTube now.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You must hit the go live button. So if
I only see myself though.
Hmm.
Should I log out and stream and come back?
No. Stay exactly where you are, and
right.
I will.
Well, I don't need to see you guys, but I don't know if. Okay, Heather Ann says I see you. Do you see just me or all three of us? People out there in the world. We hear you loud and clear, but only see you. Okay, so they're only seeing what I'm seeing.
Yeah, why is that? Let's have a look.
Well, I made you host after I clicked into this, so maybe I should click out and go back in.
It should just be copying Zoom, and on Zoom right now, there's all three of us. Can you see all three of us on Zoom as well? Yeah, maybe.
No, they're saying they just see me.
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the YouTube on this screen now. Out of interest, can anybody hear a British voice? Put it in the comments as well. It'd be good to know if the audio is working. Clish, you need to ad lib a little bit while we fill the space. I'm just seeing if there's any.
Who, me? I'm waiting. If I speak with a British accent, then that'll really confuse things. It should be view setting in Zoom, according to Bob Hope. Right. Bob Hope, I thought you were dead, man.
Yeah, Chris.
Right. Jordan asks if we're trying to stream a Zoom call. That's what we're doing,
That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah.
Well, this would be very appropriate that our audience talks us through how to do this. I feel like that's what's happened for 500 episodes. No, I cannot see you, Andronio.
Yeah.
Looks like there are 60 people joining at the moment. Happy. Thank you, Pink Flamingo. 500. Wow. Should make a list of every other thing I've done 500 times. It would be not appropriate for children. That's for sure. Let's do it.
I'm stuck. I've run out of options now. I'm changing the views here, and I can see nothing's changing on YouTube, which is really strange.
I just worry that I started it before we had made you the host on Zoom.
Possibly. So if we can just pause everybody. Yeah, if you can end the live stream, we can start.
So I'm going to end the live stream and then come back.
Yeah.
Okay. So stay where you are, everybody. We'll be right back after this commercial break.
Oh, technical issues. We love you. Okay. So it stops now on YouTube. That's for sure. Let me just have a quick.
Okay, now it says stream finished.
So there we are. We're all back. We're on YouTube. It's working. All three of us are there now.
Really?
Whatever you did, congrats. Yeah, there's all three of us on. I can see. Woohoo!
Well okay. Done, all right. Well, I just ended the stream. So is this being recorded? Are you sure?
It's. I can see it now. Yeah.
But is the stream being recorded on YouTube?
There's a lag. Yes. Oh, it's live on YouTube.
That's weird because I just ended it.
Yeah, and I'm just listening back now onto YouTube. So we're
there. Good.
Yeah, and they've all said it's working now. I can see you. I can see all three of you.
Sweet.
It says you had 2 live streams open. I don't know what happened there, so apologies, everybody.
Oh, okay. Beautiful. Sure. All right. So I'm going to click off that. And I guess we're good. I guess we're good to go, right?
We are good to go.
All right. Sweet. Well, welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
This is fucking weird.
Can I start you off with something, Chris? Because I thought it's quite apt. So you did a podcast with Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell a little while ago. I think it was about 9 years ago. And on there, you were congratulating Joe for 500 episodes. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
And you said some congratulations. He said, "You shouldn't congratulate me. I'm just trying." I tried to get the actual quote. He goes, you just sort of keep doing them and it gets to 500." And I wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
That's funny. I was thinking about that recently, actually. That it made him uncomfortable. I think when I said, when I called attention to the 500, you could see it's like some people with birthdays, like me, for example. I don't like birthdays. I don't like calling attention to the passage of time or whatever. It feels like a bad luck, kind of thing where it's like, it's going to get fucked up now that we're celebrating it somehow. Yeah. So yeah, that's an interesting connection, and he's probably pushing 1,000 by now, or maybe more.
I think 16 or 1700 now. I think.
Oh Jesus, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's true. I mean, I think if you look at something as, like I want to write 10 books, you're going to end up with some really shitty books because you're focused on completing a list rather than letting it happen organically. And I feel like this podcast is really interesting for me because it's something that I've enjoyed organically the whole time. And so looking back and saying 500 episodes, holy shit. And I look at the list and it's like, oh yeah, that guy, and her, I forgot about her. It's awesome. It feels really good, but it doesn't, maybe this is what Joe is getting at. It doesn't feel like an accomplishment because I've been having fun the whole time. So it's like nobody congratulates you for having taken 500 shits, or eaten 500 or drank 500 beers or whatever. It's like, yeah, I like beer, so I drink a lot of beers.
Can I be an annoying technical person? The link for the 500th episode, if you click on it, does not go to where we're speaking right now.
Yeah, I saw somebody in the group put that. Although it is live on YouTube.
We're live on his channel, but it's not the link that we just promoted to everybody. For the
Ouch.
episode. Yeah.
Do we have a link to this one that we could throw up on social media?
Yeah, I can put it in the chat to you now, and then I don't know if you want to pop it into
like
WhatsApp.
Anya can just throw it up because we sent people to the wrong place.
Hopefully people are getting alerts. People are finding us, and I can see people chatting with us now. But yeah, it's not sure what's going on there. Something techie.
Okay, I'm gonna throw this up on Twitter real quickly, and Anya, you'll throw it up on Instagram.
I'll do the same on my channel as well. Give me 1 sec.
Yeah, I mean, there's like 6 broken links now.
So those that are with us, bear with us. We're so sorry about this. Bloody me and Zoom always goes wrong when we're doing a live stream.
Well, better you than me, man. I wouldn't have even tried this. All right, so let me get back where I can see people's comments. Where is it? Here. Okay. All right. Hello, Heather Ann from Nashville, Indiana. What's up? Mark from Wales. Hey, London. This is awesome. Dane. I know Dane, Florida. Dane's a marine biologist, I believe. Pink Flamingo. So are people here? Because these comments look like they've lost. These comments look like they lost the feed when we stopped that other stream. And where's Mike? Have we lost Mike?
What I'll do, I'm going to pop onto the old stream and just leave like a little message on there, just in case there is anybody waiting.
I think what I see here, yeah, maybe I'm looking at the comments from the old stream. Where's the new stream?
If you just go back into, if you just go maybe head on just main screen of YouTube, it should hopefully just bring you back to the top one. But I'm just going to go to the original one and leave a comment.
Okay. Fuck. Live.
Yeah.
Oh, here we are.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, man. Okay. Anya, can you hear me?
I can, yeah. I'm just trying to fix the like 12 broken links on Instagram. So
Well, make sure you got the right one.
I do.
And I'm trying to see the chat that's on the new one without watching the new one. How do I see the people there?
So hopefully,
I'm sorry, guys, if you hear us, this confusion.
okay, there's 58 people
Apologize.
now. I'm hoping that's the same sort of 57, 58 that were with us 5 minutes ago. I've put a message on there. So hopefully people will see that and jump on over with the link as well.
Okay. This reminds me of helping my parents with technology. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Where are we again?
Yeah. Anya,
Yes.
when you get a minute, can you come and help me help your daddy with this? Because I can't see the comments.
Okay.
And
yes.
I want to respond to people while we're dragging them through our confusion. Christina Powell says, will you do another Toma episode? Yes, I intend to. I've got a list of Toma subjects that I want to do, but sorry, Christina. No, I want it in live chat, but I just can't view it and have the Zoom up at the same time.
Why are you all
Pop out chat. There. Okay, here we go. Thank you. Yeah, so I do intend to do more Tomas. It's a weird thing, the Toma. It's like a mood thing. There's a particular headspace that I get into, and it feels appropriate to do that kind of thing. And I don't get into that headspace as much as I used to. I think part of it is because I was living alone for a while. And so, I'd have been alone for a couple of days, and I just feel like talking to someone, and I'll pour myself a glass of wine and hook into you folks and tell you a story. And that felt really good to me. And again, like I was saying earlier, it felt really organic. And I try to organize my life in such a way that I really am only doing what I feel like doing at any given time. And so that makes things very sort of chaotic and unreliable. And people are like, oh, why don't you do more of this? Or, go back and do more of those book things. And I love all those things, but I love them when I love them. So, but yes, I do intend to do more Tomas for sure. Thank you for your question. How do you stay sane in an insane world? Well, I question your premise that I'm sane. So I don't know. It's I think I'm happy, and I think I find meaning, and I think that's more important than questions of sanity, I guess. Shrimp Parade is long overdue. Yes, I know. But see, again, that's a thing that it happened when it happened, and it was easy. And, we were all in LA, and it was easy to schedule, and everybody was down. And at this point, it would be, Zoom computer confusion to try to do something like that. So I'm afraid the Shrimp Parade days are probably over, because I'm sure as fuck not going to move to Austin. All right, so we're back. Are we good? Are we
We're
live?
back.
Are we
We're good.
supposed to be?
It looks like we're all good now. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. And it says, what, there are like 200 people or something? I don't know.
84 right now, which is great.
84. Great. Well, welcome, everyone. I saw someone posted a millennial's guide to saving the Zoom chat. That was nice.
Yay.
Quick wit. Thank you, millennial. Are you a millennial, Mike?
I'm an elder millennial. So I'm 82. I was born. So I think I just scraped by.
You are, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just barely a boomer. Officially, I'm like the last boomer. Yeah. When all the boomers are dead, I'll be,
What was after
standing
the boomer?
around.
What was the next? What was after that?
I don't know. Was it Gen X or something, or was that much later? I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think. See, I think this whole generational thing is total bullshit, right?
Marketing, isn't it?
It's just nonsense.
Mm.
The whole idea of like, oh, that was a generation. I think the boomers sort of made sense as a generation because that was the returning veterans from World War II. You know, they came back, they had the college education paid for by the, Veterans Administration. And so there was this kind of like, it's like, American culture had been on pause during World War II. And so afterwards, it like kicked back into gear. All these kids were born because the men were coming back. And it's a whole lot of fucking going on, and Elvis. And so it made sense. But then I think there was no generation after that because there was no huge disruptor like World War II, that sort of made the wave ripple through the culture. And yeah, I think after that, it's just marketing nonsense. So fuck it. That's what I say. All right. Hey, we got Steve Carter. He's a boomer. Yeah, you're a legit boomer. So anyway, did you guys want to ask questions, or should we keep looking at the comments, or what? I feel bad seeing them scroll by and ignoring them. It feels rude.
I was just adding the correct link to the last video in the description, just in case anyone's
wonderful.
still confused. Just trying to.
Yeah, this is somebody says it's cool to be live streaming and interacting. I agree. Thank you, S. Sagro. Is it sanity, or are most people just asleep 98% of the time? Like tunnel vision, level of awareness only existing at the whim of limbic system, then rationalizing that linguistically? Yeah, probably. That sounds pretty true. I mean, we're animals, right? And I think, we're this fancy animal that supposedly knows it's an animal or has enough consciousness to deny the fact that it's an animal. But I do think that, as Brad says, it's 98% of our existence is instinctive. 98% of our anxieties are automatic reactions to things. And we're not really, we're the flea on the top of the elephant that thinks that it's controlling the movements of the elephant. But I think we're not. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about what Mike here is doing with his podcast, Take a Deep Breath.
Nice segue, Chris.
Yeah. Breathing is the bridge between what happens automatically and instinctively and what happens consciously. So as you start to take control of breathing and be more conscious of it, I think that spreads into other areas of our physiology. I remember talking with Andrew Weil about this a long time ago. He had said in one of his books that breathing is the bridge between the autonomic and what's the other, the two nervous systems, the one that's automatic and the one that's controlled, sympathetic. Sorry. And he said that's the bridge. It's the only thing that really you do consciously when you're aware of it, but then when you stop being aware of it, it just happens automatically. And I thought, I'd studied psychophysiology a lot and was very interested in it. And the first thing that popped to mind for me, no pun intended, was erections, right? You, as a man, you can give yourself an erection just by thinking inappropriate thoughts, but then you don't have to be thinking anything and it can just happen automatically. So I think, it sounds like I was just being a smartass, which I was, and it embarrassed him a bit when I said that. But I think that that's why sexuality and breathing are key to so many meditative technologies, right? I think, there are systems of yoga that are very much keyed into the movement of erotic energy and the awareness of eroticism. And that's always appealed to me, of course, which has made Buddhism complicated for me because of the sort of vilification of desire. So I've spent a lot of time trying to meditate, listening to people say desire is the enemy. And I'm like, no, dude, desire is what keeps me alive. Desire is not something to be eschewed or expelled from our life. Desire is something to be appreciated and welcomed and controlled, but controlled in a friendly way, the way you control a horse you're riding, right? Not in a abusive way or a shameful way.
I had a chap on my podcast a little while ago, and he's a relationship person of sorts that helps relationships. I'm not sure what the correct term is, but he has a breathing technique. I haven't actually tried it yet, where you sit back to back with your partner, and there's something there about being supported by each other while you kind of do this rhythmic breathing, and the rhythms kind of sync up, and it's meant to be a really lovely way of building a connection. So I quite like that. That kind of goes deeper into the breathing and the sexuality and the connection and all that sort of stuff. I just wanted to say, because I'm just conscious probably a lot of your audience don't know who the hell I am sitting here, because obviously they know you.
I don't know who the hell you are.
I don't know who
some Zoom.
I don't know who any of you guys are.
I just like a guy who works at Zoom
before too.
I'm just also not doing myself a very good service, because I'm technically doing a lot of video stuff for you, and both times you and I've tried to do some video stuff, things have gone a bit BS, haven't they? So we Chris and I tried to do an interview 3-4 months ago, and something crashed on my webcam, and even now this Zoom thing. But I, as Chris said, I run a breathing podcast called Take a Deep Breath, and I've got a YouTube channel which also is the same thing, breathing exercise, and I'm sure we'll talk about a few bits today. But also I've got, I think, the privilege of doing Chris's YouTube channel for him. So I'm the one that's editing the videos with the audio and sticking them online and trying to get people to subscribe. So if you're watching this right now and you haven't hit that subscribe button, this would be the perfect time to do so. If you could just give it a little tickle.
Nice. Yeah. Ring the bell.
And there are some actual videos of you whenever you do remote interviews, so people can actually see you talking to them live, if you're into that kind of thing.
Right. And you've gone to your AirPods rather than the wired ones.
Apparently nobody could hear me, which I did sort of hear in the sound check, but thought it might come through. So I've switched. Hopefully I'm audible.
Yeah, no, it sounds good.
Christina Powell asks, Chris, will you write a fictional book about the hunter-gatherer time? I think I did mention that. Yes, Christina, I very much am interested in doing that. And in fact, it's something that Anya and I have talked about working on together. So she would probably be the principal author on that, and I would be the what do we call me? The prehistory consultant or something?
Consultant, yeah. I have like 40 something pages, so it's a real-ish thing at this point.
Yeah, and just for you guys, should we tell them a little bit about it? Just a little tease or not? How do you feel?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, this is a tease. I mean, it's basically a fictional story that is coming from the perspective of a woman, but will obviously have multiple characters in it. And it's pretty much an erotic novel, and all of the really scandalous, taboo sex scenes will all be based in anthropological research. So it'll be both erotic and educational.
Right.
And yeah, I'm really excited about it. We're hopefully going to work on it this winter and have some downtime to focus. So
Clan of the Cave Bear meets 50 Shades of Grey. but much better written and historically accurate. I mean, I think that's the thing, that, people love reading eroticism, but if you can give them eroticism that is also historically accurate, that people really do and did these things, I think that'll be useful for people. Someone, Keith, asks, are you going to get Rick Beato on again? I would love to. I hope so. But he's one of those guys who's getting so famous that who knows what'll happen. But he's a real cool guy, really a sweet dude, and he certainly doesn't need to, he's not getting any big benefit from being on my podcast, but he and I are buddies now, so it's a good chance to catch up. So yes, Keith,
Chris, do you want me to manage the questions for you so you don't have to read them and I can just kind of tell you?
Yeah. And while you're doing that, I just made a couple of notes. Someone said something about wanting to do a documentary about Wilhelm Reich. I think that would be great. I would love to see more about him. He's a super interesting character. For those of you who don't know, he was one of Freud's students. In fact, he was sort of Freud's chosen successor for a time. And then he and Freud had a falling out, as happened with Carl Jung as well, and Freud. But Wilhelm Reich was fascinating. He had this idea that erotic energy is the life energy, and he did some controversial therapeutic approaches, and then kind of lost his shit and ended up in prison. And yeah, he's a really interesting character, and I think underappreciated. So I agree with whoever said that. And then someone asked what I thought about Stoicism. I think Stoicism is awesome. I think it's very much, it's a source of great wisdom. The idea that, people think Stoicism as it's understood today is all about renunciation of pleasure, but that's not really how the Greeks understood it. At least my understanding of their understanding is that it was about sort of maximizing pleasure, but in ways that are most efficient and intelligent. And so they would have said, don't spend your life chasing money, spend your life appreciating the beauties of life and love and sex and good food, but not expensive food, just good food, right? And so they were not about renouncing pleasure. They were, in a way, about cultivating pleasure, but in a much more thoughtful and intelligent way.
So speaking of,
oh, go ahead, Anya.
I was just going to say, speaking of cultivating pleasure, someone asked, do you think people are having sex these days? Which I think is an interesting question that we were talking about yesterday.
People I know are.
I think there's a lot of I don't know, the world has become so squeaky clean and particular about what to say and what to do that I think about that a lot, actually, if people are having less sex, because we've sort of, you would think we would shame pleasure less these days, but I think in many ways we're becoming even more uptight.
Yeah, well, and largely because I think a lot of the people who used to be shamelessly promoting pleasure have somehow become the scolds. Andrew Sullivan just wrote a really interesting piece on this that we were discussing last night, about how a lot of the LGBT community, left off the Q, although isn't Q redundant? Isn't queer just like I'm one of the other letters? I don't know. Anyway, he was saying that, the gay rights movement used to be the ones who were all about free speech and rational argument, and I want to hear what you have to say, and we just deserve to be equal. And now they're all about, you're transphobic if you don't agree with this, or you're anti this, or you're anti that. It's become the people who used to be promoting sex and fun and it's like hippies. It's like scoldy hippies. What the fuck is that? You can't be a scoldy hippie.
And wokeness is just not really that sexy.
Well, that's it, opinion. Right? Because sexy is about accepting and pursuing the other, right? And wanting to merge with the other. If you're just like everything, you already know what it is, and it's only what's acceptable. Sex is messy, both literally and figuratively.
And it's taboo, and it kind of should be outside the lines, and power. And there's all these things that we're kind of sanitizing it against. And I think those are the things that make sex interesting, and why we are attracted to certain things is its kind of taboo nature. And if we just do everything color in the lines, as it were, then it becomes kind of like a boring coloring book.
Yeah.
I was going to say, there's a really good TV show on Netflix called Sex Education. It's a British show, but I guess it's probably on Netflix everywhere. And it's so good because it it's not afraid to like tackle all the different issues. So you've got like people in their 50s that are having a baby, and you've got all, you know, different types of relationships, and it's just bringing that conversation to a place where like you're sitting down watching TV and you think, oh, okay, and we're all learning things from it. So I don't know if anyone's had chance to see that yet, but I think it's a really important show that, I don't know if it's been recognized as that yet, but it's just made it very, very mainstream to talk about all of the different things that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Someone I saw earlier, someone asked about large age gaps in relationships. And he or she said like a 20-year-old with a 40-plus-year-old. I think the thing about age gaps, when I was 30, I had a relationship with a woman who was 19 or 20 when we met. So there was roughly a 10-year difference. And that was a massive age gap. That was a big age gap. And now I'm with someone who's 33 and I'm 59. So it's a much bigger, numerically a bigger gap, but it's much smaller in real life. And so I think the thing about age gaps is the years get smaller as you get older. And for me, the difference is, are we talking about two adults or not? Because if you're talking about someone who's very young and an adult, then I think it's problematic. But I think that certain people, they become adults at different ages. I probably became an adult around 35, maybe. I don't know. Everybody has different speed, but I think if they're two adults, then the age isn't really an issue. But it's someone who's 20 and someone who's 45. I don't know. Anya, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I was with someone, I was 22 and he was 46 at the time. And that was a big mistake, I think, simply because most people in their 20s, if things are working well, they shift and change and try on lots of different identities and outfits and kind of are figuring out who they are in that period of time. And who I thought I wanted to be at 22 was nothing at all similar to who I was and who I ended up being at, even 27, 28. So I don't think it was the age, like you said, that was the issue. It was the fact that I couldn't rightfully say, I know what I want at 22 through 26, 27, or, it depends. For other people, they don't become who they're going to be. I don't know, Chris, you say this really interesting thing that there's like, we go through all these kinds of deaths and rebirths when we're young. And then at some point we go through like this kind of, not as if we won't change after that, but we kind of become the person we're kind of going to be for the rest of our lives. And I think that can happen for people at different ages, but it very rarely happens, I think, before your late 20s. And I think until you've gone through that kind of last death rebirth cycle of like, okay, that was not who I wanted to be. That didn't make any sense. That didn't feel right. Until you've done that, I don't think it makes a ton of sense to commit to something long term. I think it's stifling for like all parties involved.
Do you think that when that last life and death rebirth thing happens though? Because that's quite interesting, because I would say 35 for me was a big one, and a big shift. But will that happen again? I don't know. I'm not sure if I can be confident enough to say that.
I don't think so. I think it happens at some point, and also I don't think it happens for everyone. I just recorded a podcast with Dallas Hartwig, talking a lot about masculinity, and he made the point that there are three phases of a man's life, and you can listen to the podcast. It'll come out in a few weeks, but he made the point that most men in the Western world are stuck in the second phase and never move to the third phase, the actual adult phase. And I think that's a problem. And I think that's, Anya can speak to this as well. Like, I think a lot of women are attracted to older men, not so much because they're older, but because there's a better probability that they've moved into that third phase, which isn't
not a foolproof
about
system though.
No, of course not. And so Anyway, but what I was going to say is I feel like these phases are, you become an adult and then you just get older, but you don't have that same kind of transformation that you have from teenager to adult. So yeah, and people talk about a midlife crisis, right? In men, what's the midlife crisis? It's, oh, I married the wrong woman. I'm not happy with my job. I feel like all I do is, get up and run all day to try to pay bills. I'm not getting anywhere and there's no meaning in my life. And I don't think that's a midlife crisis. I think that's a boy trying to figure out how to be a man. And that if you figure it out, then of course you're refining it and adjusting. But I feel like that's such a transformative thing. It's like coming out of the closet, right? Or leaving Mormonism. We have a bunch of friends who are ex-Mormons, and that's such a huge thing to step away and say, no, I don't believe this. I need to be what I am, Yeah. I do think it happens, and then you just sort of move on from there.
I think, I don't know if we had this conversation when we did my podcast, but that's exactly what happened to me. So I remember I'd put my little earbuds in and walk to work in the morning. I've been in the job at that point 12 or 13 years. I'd walked into the same office building for over a decade. I remember thinking, how many thousands of times have I stepped through these front doors into the same wall? And then I started listening to your podcast, Joe's podcast. I'm thinking, shit, there's so much more out here. And that really was, for me personally, and I'm sure there's other people that watch this, a big awakening, hearing stories of travel from far off India and all these places in the 80s and 90s that was so different, and hearing people talk so openly about sex and relationships and how, things can be different and better and all that sort of stuff. So the power of this podcast in particular, I'm sure, and I know you've said this before, but it's hard where to put this, but when people give you that praise, but you've affected a lot of lives, Chris, and for the better as well. And I know I get some comments sometimes on the breathing videos, and some really personal ones sometimes, and I don't know what to do with them as well. It's a tough thing, but I think it's worth saying on the 500th anniversary of the first podcast, where everyone looked at, you've done some cracking stuff, and I personally am very appreciative of what you've done.
Well, thank you. Thanks. But as I was saying, it's only easy because it feels good to me, right? Like I'm not trying to affect other people's lives. I'm just, spouting my bullshit. And if it works out that way, beautiful. Anya, you were going to say something?
Yeah. So someone is asking about what your thoughts are on spiritual awakening. And I think that kind of relates to this. I'm personally interested in what you have to say about this as well, and how that kind of relates to that kind of last final coming of age in a way. And whether you think you had that kind of, I hate that word, but awakening to some extent through psychedelics or traveling, where you sort of realize like, wow, the world is much larger, much different than I sort of initially thought. And that felt a little bit unnerving, or like the ground was sort of shaking beneath you.
Yeah, I often refer to that first trip to Alaska I took, where my life path dissolved before me. I thought I knew what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go, and I had all these contacts, and I was doing really well as a literature student, and I had this professor who was a big shot at Oxford, and he was going to get me in, and I was going to like be that guy, the tenured professor at some college by the time I was 30. And I was hitchhiking, and I met all these amazing people who were super kind to me, and took me home and let me sleep on the sofa, and then gave me a ride back out to the highway the next day and picked me up in the rain. There was a woman I'll never forget her, in Bend, Oregon, who took me out, and she was taking me back to the highway, and she was like, "Your shoes are falling apart, dude." And we stopped at a mall, and she said, "I'm buying you shoes. You need new shoes." And I was like, "Oh no, it's okay." And like, no, I'm buying you shoes. Anyway, her last name was Love. I don't remember her first name, but I remember her name was Love. Anyway, that for me, I mean, I was 20 or 21 maybe, but that was a really important pivot point for me because I met people who were totally different from me, didn't value or understand the things that I thought were super important, but were awesome people and were happy and made me, the combination of meeting them and the physical distance of being away from college and my whole crowd back in college, I had the perspective to look back and realize, like, fuck, like the people I admire aren't really happy and they don't have good relationships and they're bitter, and they would make fun of these people if they met them. They would make fun of how uneducated they are and how, pedestrian their tastes are, and that they don't read Nietzsche or listen to Mahler and all this shit. And yet these people were helping me and being really kind to me and welcoming me. And the disparity of those two worlds just became so clear to me. And so that was a big awakening for me to sort of see, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm on the path to a place I don't actually want to go. I don't know where I want to go. All I know is I want to hang out with people who have their shit together and who are kind to strangers, and who, I admire this guy whose wife loves him, and he's got these cool dogs, and he knows how to fix his truck, and he built his house with his own hands. And like, this guy's awesome. And yeah, he hasn't read these books I've read, and he doesn't listen to this music, and he doesn't, have the IQ that these friends of mine have. But who cares? He's figured his shit out and he's living a good life. And that's more important. So that was a big moment. The moment I quit my job in New York, where the guy was offering me $1 million to stay, and I just like, fuck no, I got to go. And what's interesting about that is, actually, this is something your father was saying, Anya, just this morning. When you're young, you're on a path and you come to a crisis point where you're like, I don't think this is the right path for me. Like what Mike was just saying, he's going into his job for 1,000th time, and he's like, this isn't my path. But the problem is, you don't have the alternative. You don't know what is the right path. And so it's very scary to say, I'm going to abandon this, and I have no idea what I'm going to replace it with. It's like leaving a relationship. It's really hard. And a lot of people wait around till they meet someone else, and then they just jump from one to another. But what really takes courage is to say, I'm going to swim away from this island I'm on, because this isn't the right island for me. And yeah, maybe I won't find another island. Maybe I'm going to just be lost at sea, but I need to go. I need to find out. I think that's a real problem that a lot of young people have, where they're like, I don't want to leave this until I've got something better. That's not the way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's two metaphors there that comes to mind. One is, if anyone's ever tried rock climbing or whatever, bouldering, whatever it's called, you grip on so hard and you actually have to relax and let your arms do the work, because you can't use your biceps to hold your whole body up. It's impossible. And so there's this moment of faith where you just have to trust in your arms. But there was a metaphor to something you said, actually, Chris, in a podcast ages ago. This is the benefit of being a long time fan. Actually, I feel like I've won the tangentially lottery here, getting to have this conversation with you as well. But you talked a bit about travel on one of your podcasts, in terms of most of the energy is expelled trying to get off the surface of the planet. Right. And then once you're
like
out,
a rocket. Yeah.
And so it kind of goes back to the faith that you've got to have to leave the island or whatever. But also there's this piece around, it's going to take a lot of energy, but you need that faith of where you're trying to get to. But it actually does get a lot easier once you've kind of made some decisions. And I think that was a really good bit of advice, because that, going back to that job again, after that was 14 years, I quit that job in the end to buy a one-way ticket out of the UK. And that metaphor stayed with me a lot during that, because it's like, I know most of the energy is here. And even, I think you even put this piece in one of your conversations around, you end up having all these goodbye parties, and you end up thinking, oh, I should stay because this is lovely. But actually they're only giving you those parties because it's a goodbye. You're not going to get that if you decide to stay.
It's true. It's true. It's like I would always meet some really attractive woman just before I was leaving who was interested in being with me. And it was always, it was like the universe is fucking with my head here, man. I've quit my job. I told them I'm leaving my apartment. I sold my car. And now I meet you a week before I'm leaving. But then I realized, like, no, the reason these women are attracted to me is because I've got the energy of a guy who's doing what the fuck he wants to do. I've got the energy now. I didn't have it 3 months ago when I was like wringing my hands trying to decide what to do with my life. But since I made the decision and started putting it into action, my energy is different. And so of course these women pop out at that moment. It's not the universe fucking with me. It's the nature of reality that these kinds of people are attracted to someone who's doing what they want to do, Yeah.
Yeah. I had a question personally, and someone else asked about this, so it's a good tie-in. They were asking about individualism, and I think it might be interesting for you to kind of talk a little bit about your opinions about that individualism versus like community mindsets, collectivism. And also if you feel like throughout the length of your podcast that people have kind of been attracted to you for being this kind of like contrarian, someone that doesn't necessarily agree with the masses, and whether there have been points in the podcast where you feel like you kind of surprised the audience in a way that they did list and contrarian and someone who doesn't, trust the government or trust this. And just curious if you've had times where you're like, yeah, I'm gonna maybe piss people off, and maybe people had the wrong idea of who I was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a trick question because Anya knows the answer to it. Yeah, definitely. I piss people off all the time. I think the thing that seems to have pissed people off the most was in early COVID days when I was saying, what the fuck is wrong with people who don't wear masks? A lot of people were like, masks don't do anything, and blah, blah, blah. And there's all this controversy. And to me, it's like, look, it's pretty obvious that a mask, the virus is in your saliva. A mask filters your saliva, reduces the amount of fucking spray that goes out from your pie hole. This isn't complicated. And I certainly sympathize with people who have to wear a fucking mask all day, and it's a pain in the ass. And, but that doesn't mean it's not an effective way to mitigate the spread. I hate condoms, but hey, condoms are pretty fucking good at blocking venereal diseases, right? So it's one question is, do you like it? Is it fair that you have to wear it at work all day? Blah, blah, blah. But the other question is it effective at dealing with what we're trying to do? And to me, that was super clear. And yeah, I got a lot of blowback, a lot of people saying, I thought you were cool, man. I thought, you disagreed with the government. I thought you're just another fucking sellout or shill or whatever. And the problem is, I'm not a contrarian. I'm a free thinker. I think for myself. I'm a critical thinker. I'm pretty good at analyzing arguments. I'm pretty good at seeing what makes sense and what doesn't, I think. And so that's what I do. And I'm not choosing a position because it fits a particular agenda, like the anti-government agenda or the anti-corporate agenda or the anti-big pharma agenda. I am often anti-government. I'm often anti-big pharma. I'm often anti everything. But you got to pick and choose because vaccines are fucking awesome. Vaccines save a lot of lives. Now, is it fair that Pfizer took money from the government to develop the vaccine really quickly and is now charging lots of money to distribute the vaccine? No, of course not. That's bullshit. That's corrupt as fuck. But does the vaccine work? Yes, it does. They do. Am I vaxxed? I saw somebody ask. Yes. Fuck yeah, I'm vaxxed. And I'm going to get a booster as soon as I get back to the States. So, some people will be upset with that, but I don't give a shit. These are my positions. These are the things that I believe. And I feel like my only real responsibility to this platform and to the fact that, you people are tuning in to listen to this is to tell you what I think is true. I can be wrong for sure. But it's not to stroke you with predictably anti this or that positions.
Have you thought about like sort of how, because I think at the root of a lot of this debate, at least in my experience, has been this idea of individualism versus collectivism. And I kind of struggle sometimes because I feel like even in my life, I had to like do this thing where I extricated myself from a lot of kind of toxic or harmful ideas and had to really protect myself and set boundaries and think for myself and not prioritize other people and their needs. And then eventually I feel like I kind of came full circle to realize like, well, I think what will ultimately save us is actually us protecting each other and working together. And I think that people are having a hard time trying to balance like responsibility for others versus protecting themselves or setting boundaries for themselves. And what do you think about how one can do that?
That's a big question. And I would question the premise too, like, is anything ultimately going to save us? Like, we're doomed. We're all doomed eventually. I think, not to be cliched, but, it all comes down to love, right? And love requires understanding and acceptance and vulnerability and all these sort of secondary components of love. And it's very hard to experience those things with people you don't actually know. You can experience something that feels like it, right? Like you can see some actor or podcaster or somebody and feel like, that person resonates with me, but they don't know you. And so it's a one-way relationship. It's all weird. So I do feel like the best way forward is for us to return to some kind of small scale communal existence and take care of each other. And I think, that requires taking steps toward, growing as much of our own food as we can. Like we've got a collection of friends where one guy's an auto mechanic and he fixes cars. He did the van with me and he took care of a friend of ours who's got a thing and whatever. And, and we try to take care of other people in the community in whatever way we can. And so this interdependence of people on a small scale, I think is really healthy and a very robust, anti-fragile kind of way of getting through life that worked for hundreds of thousands of years for our ancestors. And so I do feel like a lot of what's going on right now is seeing that this huge, large scale social organization is failing us. And it's failing itself. It's, destroying the planet. It's the consumerism is not making people happy. Facebook is making people miserable. Suicide rates are going up. Depression's going, all these problems. And what do we need? We need each other, but we need to do it locally, I think. It's really important that we take care of people we know and not just some abstract Facebook friend that we've never met.
Yeah, someone says, I love this community. I live in a working class English neighborhood, and all of you are the closest friends I can have. And I think like that, and we also don't really know who's around us, which is like a really unfortunate part of the kind of society and civilization that we have. Like you could have someone three doors down from you that listens to Tangentially Speaking, like as you do, and you wouldn't ever know. And we kind of think of neighbors or family or community in this sort of abstract way. And I kind of like to think like, since starting my podcast, having gone from a position of knowing nobody like me and having no friends, and absolutely similarly to Mike, listened to your podcast and other podcasts and was like, okay, there are people like me, and now I just need to go about finding them. And I think once we do find them and we're like, okay, well, I would absolutely take one for the team and protect those people. And it's difficult for us to find each other sometimes, but we do exist. I think that's something that we experience a lot with the meetups. Like, we have these meetups in cities, and these people that live in these cities come to the meetup and have never met each other before, and yet live in the same place and, have the same interests. I think that's been a really sort of like gratifying and uplifting, inspiring thing to do.
Yeah.
It's like a filter, isn't it? I guess. I mean, I've not had the privilege to be at one of your meetups, but when I've gone to events, be it, some sort of yoga thing or breath thing or Wim Hof thing, there's a filter that happens where not everybody's there. And actually, I felt that when I've not done lots of mountains, but when I've climbed some English mountains and bits, you tend to find, and not always, but it filters people out. So by the time you get to the top of that mountain, it tends to be other people that really enjoy mountains and nature that are there. And you end up having a really nice conversation with them. Where the people right down the bottom that are maybe in the cafe or something or wherever, it tends to be that it's not always the highest percentage of people you've got things in common with or connections. So yeah, there is something to this filtering process. I was just thinking though, I've spent a lot of my life working in call centers, contact centers, and there's something for me around you could be having a phone call. So we all ring our whatever mobile phone providers, and we've got a problem, and maybe I've not been the nicest human being sometimes when I've been had a problem with my phone or whatever it is, and I've had some awful experiences of people ringing me and complaining to me. But then I think you go to a comedy event or something, and you could be sitting next to that same person laughing your socks off. I always wonder about that, is like sometimes the hats that we put on in different events. But I guess what you're talking about, Anya, is like when by the time it gets to people being together in those groups, you've kind of gone through a number of different filters to be around your tribe of people, I guess. I don't know. It's just something very interesting there.
Yeah, I think that filtering process that you talk about is hugely important and underappreciated. That's one of the reasons I traveled a lot, actually, in my 20s and 30s. Partly it wasn't just that I love traveling, which I did, but one of the things I loved so much about traveling wasn't even about the new place I was in. It was about the people I met there, the travelers, right? Because as you say, there's this, who am I going to meet in Pokhara, Nepal in 1987? I'm going to meet somebody who had the energy to get that liftoff that you talked about, right? To escape. They achieved escape velocity from wherever they were, whatever family shit, whatever work shit, whatever money shit. They figured it out and they got the fuck out, and there they are. So you meet these free spirits, and you meet people who are freer than you are, people who have been on the road longer than you have, people who have been places you never even thought about. And so it becomes this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy vibe where you meet the people who are your people. They're your tribe. Of course, it's heartbreaking because then they move on, you move on. But man, I had friendships of a week with some of those people that went deeper than other people I knew for a couple of years, right? And so I think that's super important. And the other part of my life where I've seen that play out is in dating. I think I talk about this on the podcast a lot, where people are trying to develop a relationship with someone that they met based on how attractive they find them. And like that, having a relationship and wanting to fuck someone are two different things. And the fact that you're attracted to them is a totally arbitrary measure of how much you'll actually enjoy spending time with them. So there are all these weird self-destructive mechanisms around dating, like going to a club where the music's so loud you can't hear each other and you're supposed to meet people there. What the fuck is that? That doesn't make any sense. So I feel like one of my big turning points that you were asking about earlier, Mike, was when it's interesting. I said I felt like I became an adult around 35 because this happened around 35, but I wasn't thinking of it really. But is when I said I'm not sexually monogamous and never will be. Like, I know myself well enough now that that's just never going to be me. And I've been blaming women for this, for my discontent and my restlessness. And now I realize this is not their problem. This is not their fault. This is me. This is who I am. And acknowledging this and admitting this in the open probably means I'll never be in a serious relationship with a woman again, because at the time I thought every woman was looking for a husband who would only be with her, and there were no other options. But I was willing to pay that price. And so I started and I switched my research, my doctoral research, to human sexuality and prehistory. And so when I met a woman and she said, "What do you do?" I was like, "Well, I'm doing this PhD. Oh, what's it about?" It's about how humans aren't naturally monogamous. And I thought every woman would just say, "Phew," and get up and walk away. And half of them did, but half of them didn't. And the half who didn't were really interesting and so much easier to relate to, because I wasn't trying to sell anything to someone who didn't already want to buy it. It just changed the whole nature of my existence. So I ended up far more connected to women than I had been before. And I think that's the nature of this filtering process you're talking about. You stop pretending you're someone else. You stop trying to shape yourself to other people's expectations and desires. And suddenly you filtered out all these people you were never going to get along with anyway. And you've got much more time for the people who actually want to meet someone like you. It's easier for them to find you because you're not camouflaged anymore. It just makes everything so much easier, but it's a really scary step to take.
Yeah. When I was on, go ahead, Anya.
No, you go.
I was going to say, when I was on Tinder sort of 5 years ago, so after my marriage finished and I was this online thing that I'd never experienced before, this online dating stuff, I made sure that my net was very generic. So I picked what pictures I thought would be perfect for every scenario. With, you do the Googling, a group of friends, one with an animal, one with, blah, blah, blah. And so I had all of that in a very generic profile. And somehow I got very lucky and found my partner now, and we've been together now for sort of 5 years. I'm very, very lucky to have her. But my friend, very interestingly, he has recently gone on to Tinder, and he's gone ultra niche, or niche, as you would say over your side of the pond. And he's been very, very specific. This is what he's into. These are the things, and not in an aggressive way, a very polite way, but these are the things that I'm interested in and things I'm not. And the connections he's had have blown my mind, because people have reached out to him, girls have reached out to him, and he's had the most wonderful experiences and dates because he went down this super niche, which I never would have even considered. I thought, no, let's throw that net as wide as possible and we'll see what we can get. And he's gone, no, go down. Yeah, it was interesting.
Well, it's like, I hate to reduce it to something like this, but it's like applying for a job, right? Like, why would you apply for a job you don't want? Are you going to go through 3 interviews and, and then find out that, the pay is not really what you want. So you're not going to be happy there anyway. Like, fuck that. Who's got time for that? Plus, in addition to just the sort of logistical advantages of not throwing the net so wide, so you can focus more on something that's probably going to be worthwhile. There's also the energy thing, like we were talking about earlier, how these people appear when you're about to leave. Yeah. There's the energy of like, hey, I don't apologize for myself. I know myself. This is who I am. This is what I need. Totally cool. You're not into that. But, it's like if you really want to have kids, don't lie about that. You don't want to meet women who don't want to have kids. Like, you're just setting yourself up for a fucking problem, right? Yeah. So I think that not apologizing for who you are and being assertive is so important. And it is that moment when a girl becomes a woman or a boy becomes a man, is when like, finally figured out who I am. Now I can tell you, Hey, I saw somebody. Sorry, I just want to call out Andy Patterson. He says he's lakeside in Pokhara, Nepal. Fucking awesome, dude. I love Pokhara. All right, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say too, like, I think our society and culture feeds us this total fallacy about the fact that, like, I mean, it's in every film and so many songs and just pop culture in general, that we can't have it all, like that we have to sacrifice things, and we can't have a relationship and have it be open and live in the place that we want. And I think that's also part of that sort of like youth process, is us thinking like, oh shit, I wanted XYZ, but it doesn't really seem possible, or I don't have any examples of it, or I don't have any people that I can look up to who are doing that. And we kind of keep like detaching parts of ourselves and like cutting off limbs to kind of fit into this mode. And then I think we become kind of also desperate and controlling over what we want, and we're not going to find it. And I just think there's such an energetic and like honestly erotic shift between like letting all of that go and thinking like, you know what, I'd rather actually just be alone living the life I want than settling and doing something that's less than ideal. And I think that's a really unfortunate idea that we have, that keeps getting promoted over and over again, that like, oh, if you want the stable family, you have to deal with no sex life, and if you want the sex life, you have to deal with no intimacy. And that's just not true. And it's really harmful. And a lot of us fall into that trap, I think.
Yeah. And it's that moment of swimming away from an island you don't really want to be on without seeing anything better that you're swimming toward. Yeah. It's terrifying, but necessary.
Yeah. Someone asked about your opinion of like being American or living in America, and this, choice about whether to leave or to stay, and how to make that decision. And I know that's something you talk about and think about a lot. So
I don't know. I feel like America, the United States, is going through a real crisis right now, and I'm kind of keeping my powder dry till I see how it plays out. And I thought a few years ago that the next presidential election was going to determine what would happen, and it didn't, unfortunately. And I see the Republicans laying the groundwork to end democracy. And, as I said in my podcast just the other day, the Roma I recorded, it's a weird thing because I've never been a big fan of American culture, right? And I've never, believed in the fucking, we're the great country that defends freedom around the world and all that shit. I never bought any of that. But it was at least, to some extent, representative democracy, and people could vote, and there were options, even if there were very limited options. But I feel like that's collapsing now, and it's going to be like Brazil in the 90s or Argentina. It's going to be one party is going to get into power and they're not going to let it go. And if that happens, that's a very different country. That's a place I don't necessarily want to live in. So I don't know what's happening, and I don't really know how to think of that. I'm just sort of holding my breath and waiting to see how things play out. As far as quality of life goes, I'm almost 60, so I'm starting to think like, oh, if I get sick, what's going to happen? If I get cancer and I need chemo, I need this. Every time I need to see a doctor, I fly somewhere else. I go to Thailand and get my teeth worked on. Here in Antigua, I went to a dermatologist. It's so expensive and such a hassle in the US. Fuck it. It's like you get sick there, you lose your house, you lose everything. It's not a good place to be. It's really fucked up. So, I don't know. Did I answer the question? I don't have an answer to the question.
It's an impossible question to answer. And like,
well, thanks for asking
it. Yeah. But I know it's something you grapple with a lot. And I think a lot of us are kind of thinking about. And also, if America collapses, how does that affect the rest of the world? And I think if we ask, I just did an interview with someone who was born and raised in Pakistan. and came to America for college, and has gone through 9/11 and gone through being stopped in all sorts of ways because he's, from the Middle East. And it was a really interesting conversation to have with him, because in many ways he still feels really grateful to be here and feels like he's gotten a lot of out of America and a lot of opportunities. And so I think it's also like a very kind of subjective experiential thing. And there are, for each of us going to be problems. And, if moving abroad means then we don't get to see our families as much. And like, there's never kind of a perfect solution. And I think what you used to say too about like, oh, we'll just wait till the election. And now it's like, okay, now we'll wait till the next election. And like, it's so difficult to predict, like, how can we know what's going to happen, and maybe if there are going to be all these changes, it's going to result in, living in a fascist state, or maybe all the changes and this stuff will come about in a way that changes the country for the better. But again, it's like, we're not psychic. We have no idea. Yeah. So it's sort of a difficult place to try to land on.
I don't mean to, my view of American politics comes through yourself and Joe Rogan and everything. It's weird. I don't know what's going on in France, which is, I could arguably drive there in a couple of hours, but I know a lot more about what's going on in America. But I'm just reminded of when I was traveling, I was in Israel, and we were doing some couch surfing, and I was complaining about Brexit because I've been focusing on Brexit. This is a couple of years ago. And the couple that we were staying with, like, you're in the UK, you're going to be fine because we've got a bomb shelter in this house. And it just gave me this lovely perspective. And it's not to diminish what's going on over in America, but it was just this wonderful thing of, oh, okay, maybe some places have got it worse. And again, it's not to take it down. The other thing that I'm reminded of is I watched the Joe Rogan Yemeni Park North Korea defector interview that came out. Bloody hell. I don't know what to do with that feeling and information. But I woke up next day so grateful for where I am on the planet, because it's so horrific. The stories that she told, I just feel so lost what to do with that. But again, it just gave me this lovely sense of gratitude. So terrible things are happening, but I don't know if there's a way just to find some gratitude in some of it as well. It could be worse.
Yeah, it could definitely be worse. And also, it's almost like 3D chess, right? Like on the horizontal, you can say, well, we could be in North Korea, that would suck, right? Or we could be in, lots of places that are much harder and difficult. But then on the vertical, you can say, okay, well, you can be in the States, you could be living in, fucking Los Angeles, or you could be in this tiny town in Colorado where we have some land and we're talking about building a place where you can really control your world to a large extent, right? You can buy a cow from the rancher down the road. You've got, someone growing tomatoes over here. Like I said before, you got your buddy who fixes cars. You got an electrician who can, wire up your house, and you can build a house for $100,000 and, have it paid off and no mortgage. So it's not only across the world, but also where are you vertically within a country, and to what extent can you control your micro world? Yeah, because it's true what Anya was saying. We can't control the macro, that's for sure.
Right. And also, I mean, it's been interesting being in Guatemala too, just with the whole like vaccine COVID situation, and to see that actually in a country with less access and less privilege is acting so responsibly and so collectively, and everyone's cooperating and participating. And it's like, what does the perspective actually of not having it all the time, right? I mean, in America, we could get a vaccine anywhere we wanted at any time, at any age. And here it's quite difficult to do so. And it's like, maybe sometimes it's better to have the perspective of not being so spoiled, or like not, because here they've been able to keep COVID so far down, and they didn't even have to get to the like vaccine debate, because people took it seriously and are still wearing masks in the street and gratefully having their temperatures taken. And it's provided a really interesting perspective for me too, that like, I don't actually know how much privilege and access are doing us good if in our country, which apparently has all of that, we're acting the most selfish and the most stuck up and the most sort of cut off from the rest of the world, and understanding that any reality exists beyond ours. And it's just like a very nuanced issue.
Mhm.
That's always been an American thing, though. America's always
Yeah.
been this, separate world, uh, culturally and historically. It's interesting, and it's one of the reasons I left. I had to get
Yeah.
out.
So some people have asked about van life, and after doing the trip several times, I feel like that kind of uh, factors into your apocalypse plan, having the van and kind of being able to go places. And some people just ask like what your insights have been after the years you've been doing it, and if people wanted to get a van and in the US and travel around, like what would be your kind of top advice for them?
Yeah, the van was kind of like my emergency retirement plan. It's like, if shit totally falls apart in my life, as long as I can keep the van rolling, I can live very, very cheaply. So the van thing is like, if you're in the US, this is one of the things that's awesome about the US is there's so much public land in the West, that you can basically just move from place to place and never pay rent anywhere. And if you've got a van like what we have, you can be pretty comfortable if your comfort requirements are quite low. And so I've always felt that the key to comfort and quality of life is not pulling in more, it's needing less. And so it's kind of, Thoreau had this line that I've always remembered, which is a man's wealth is best measured by the things he can do without. And so I feel like that's the best way to really leverage control of your life and autonomy, is to need very little. So I've got no problem digging a hole in the desert and taking a dump, or fixing my food on an Instapot that's running off my solar panels. I mean, as far as vans go, the one I have is pretty luxurious. But I built it with a buddy. It wasn't, I didn't buy it that way. I didn't spend 200 grand on this van, which is probably what it would cost to get it all made that way. So I think the van life is great if it appeals to you, and you live in a place like the U.S. or Australia or Canada where there's lots of open land. In Europe, it would be a lot harder and a lot more expensive. Yeah.
So some people are asking for more insight from you in retrospective on doing 500 episodes, and I'm also curious. You sort of said that it's very difficult for you to stick to anything for a long time, and you've stuck doing this for quite a while and still seem interested. And why do you think that is compared to other things that you've done in your life? And can you kind of reflect on some of your most fond memories? I'm sure there are millions of them, but if any
Millions.
stick out in your mind from the
Well,
years
I,
past.
I mean, it's like, I think for me, the reason this is something I continue to do is that it's the 90% of podcasting is stuff I already like doing. The hassle quotient is quite low at this point. It was higher at the beginning when I didn't know how to edit or do the sound stuff, and I was uploading these podcasts and people were like, I can't hear you, dude, like you gotta raise the volume. And I was like, how do you do that? I have no idea. But the essentials of podcasting are things that I just like doing. I like meeting new people. I like conversation. I like picking someone's brain about their life. I'm legitimately curious and grateful when someone is willing to just sit down with me for an hour or two and talk about their experience in the world. I fucking love that. I'm not a journalist, so I'm not someone who's looking to catch people in a lie or expose them as, in some way. Like I appreciate that kind of thing, but that's not who I am. My thing is like, I just want to go out and say, so who are you? We were talking this summer, we were in the van. It was the first couple of days in the van, and we stopped at a construction project. So all the traffic was backed up, and we were the first vehicle. So the guy holding the sign comes over and he says, yeah, it's going to be 15 or 20 minutes or something, so you can turn off your engine and relax. I'm like, okay, thanks, man. And he keeps walking down the line, talking to people, telling them what's up. And this guy's got the most boring job in the world, right? He stands on a highway with a sign that says stop on one side and slow on the other side. And all he does is turn it back and forth when somebody tells him to. And then he comes back up and he says, how come you didn't tell me you're famous? And we're like, what? And he said, yeah, the people in the car back there, they're big fans of your podcast. And I was like, what? That's so funny. And he said, what's it called? And I told him, and what's it about? And I said, oh, just talking to interesting people, And he said, I guess everyone has a story, right? And I was like, yeah. And he said, I got a story. And I was like, I'll bet you do, man. I bet you do. And then, the rest of the summer, we're driving all around and we would see these guys standing there. And I had this idea, wouldn't it be cool to just pull over and just walk up to these guys and be like, hey, I do a podcast and I'm doing a series on guys who hold those signs on the highway. Who are you? How did you get here? What's going on? What's your life like? I would love to do that. I would love to I've also had the idea of just randomly go sit somewhere in a public park and just randomly walk up to a person and be like, hey, would you talk to me for half an hour? I just want to know who you are. And that would make me really happy. I love doing that kind of shit. So that's why this is the ideal gig for me, because it's something I already like doing. I feel like I'm well suited to it. It's easy for me. Like people say, oh, you're really good at interviewing. I was like, did I interview anyone? All I did was what I would do, exactly what I do when there's no microphone, right? It's not, there's no discipline to it or effort. And I love the interaction with the audience. So I love when I get, like just this morning, I got an email from a guy who's about to have a hip replacement. He's a vet, a fireman, and he's gone through some tough shit. And he's like, hey man, your podcast has sort of cheered me up and made me feel less alone. And I really fucking appreciate it. It's like, Jesus Christ, who gets to have that kind of presence in someone else's life with as little effort as I put into this? I'm not the nurse. I'm not the doctor. I'm just some guy just talking, and there are enough people who, for some reason, listen that it's financially viable. It's fucking awesome. And I'm so happy to know the impact that this has on people, like Mike said earlier, but I'm also so happy that the audience gives me the leverage to meet people who would never have time for me otherwise. Both, famous people who just don't have the time, or just regular folks who, if you just walked up to someone and said, hey, tell me your life story, they're like, who the fuck are you? What are you talking about? But if you say, I've got a podcast and, 50, 60,000 people listen, would you tell me your life story? A lot of people say, sure. Okay. That's amazing. I love it.
You become a friend, yes. I think, as well, because, this person going for hip surgery, and, they've had you in their ears. I've had you in my ear for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. I think it's 2015. I first heard one of your podcasts. And so that's a long time to be listening. And I don't know if either of you have ever seen this. There's a great meme about podcasters, and it's 3 people laughing, eating ice cream. And then next to it, and that's a poster. And then in real life is a guy with a bowl of ice cream looking at the poster, laughing with them. And it's the best meme that I've ever seen for a podcast, because you're sitting there and you're laughing
That's
along,
cool.
Like you're listening to your buddies have a chat. But obviously they don't know you. But I know you've talked about this before, Chris, but there's a strong relationship going the other way, and it's a funny thing. It's a funny thing we've probably never had in history, I guess, until now, to have, you know, what, 500 more plus hours of you talking, and and many people have listened to a big chunk of that, and they know you so well. It's a funny old business, isn't it?
It really is, and I don't think it's ever existed. I don't think anything like it has ever existed. And I, in the intro to one of the collections that we put together, I think it was Tangentially Speaking or Tangentially Reading, was like a sort of a best of book that we put together. I remember saying that I equate this to the invention of the printing press. Like, I think this in some ways is as radical and potentially as impactful, in the sense that, you know, here you are for the first time in history able to say anything. I can say anything. I don't have any corporation, no boss, no committee, no human resources department. I can say anything I want. And the only responsibility I have is to my own sense of, you know, honor and decency, and to the audience. And that sort of opened things up in such a way that it's revolutionary. And I think we're just starting to see the beginnings of the impact of that. And the other thing that's fascinating about it, this is something my friend Simon Rex and I were talking about. He's an actor, rapper, comedian, a very well-known guy. And we were in a cafe in LA, and the woman behind the counter was like, "Hey, wait, you're Chris Ryan. You wrote Sex at Dawn. I listened to your podcast. That's great." And she was really happy to meet me. And I gave her my card and I said, "Give me a call. We'll have a coffee sometime." And we walked away, and Simon said, "Dude, you should never do that. Never give a fan your phone number. Like, that's going to be a disaster. I'm warning you, don't do that." And Simon's a great guy, right? He was speaking from experience. Mm-hmm. And the woman called me, and we went out for a coffee, and now she's a good friend of mine. Shout out to Mary if she's out there. And later, Simon and I were talking about it. He's like, "Yeah, you know, when I said that to you, I was thinking about the people I meet who have no idea who I am, right? They've just seen my act. They've seen me pretending to be drunk on stage when I'm dirt nasty, or they saw me in Scary Movie 3, 4, and 5, or they saw me in this where I'm pretending to be that, but they have no idea who I am. So when I have a personal interaction with them, it's always awkward and weird, and they're relating to me as if I'm some character they saw. So it's always bad. Not that he doesn't love his fans and love their appreciation, but they're not reacting to him. They're reacting to something he was pretending to be. Whereas with podcasting, at least this kind of podcast, which is just hanging out, talking with people, they actually do know me. They don't know all of me. And this is something Anya can speak to, but you know, there are parts of my life I don't share on the podcast, but what I do share is actually me. I can't be bothered to act, right? I'm not an actor. So it is a weird thing where, like, you know, with that ice cream thing, it's like, yeah, they're looking at the poster, laughing along, but they're actually also part of the poster in a sense. And at this point in my life, probably over half of the people, you know, if I had to name the 20 people outside of immediate family that I'm closest to, I'll bet over half of them came through the podcast. They met me. I remember meeting a woman at one point who I was some remote place, and she was like, "Hey, I'm flying through there. I'd love to meet you. How'd you feel?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. If you want to come and meet me." And she did. And she was great. It was really cool. And at one point I said to her, "Man, you took a big risk, like coming here, you know, and flying 2 hours away out of your way to meet me." And she was like, "No, you took a risk. I know all about you. I've got a PhD in Chris Ryan and his friends. You didn't know me, but I knew you." So it is an interesting kind of intimacy.
What do you see the future looking like, Chris? So you're at 500 now. I don't think it's about maybe putting a number on, going, I'm going to get to 1,000 or 2,000. But what do you think the future of the podcast looks like?
Hopefully just more of the same, whatever that is. I mean, I don't know. Maybe people will get bored. I mean, I don't know. If people are still around after 500 episodes, I guess there's enough variety in it that it's gratifying, at least occasionally for them. But, I've got, it's interesting because I'm getting pitched a lot more now. Whereas before I thought it would be really hard to find guests. That was one of the things I learned early on. I thought like, man, what, one a week? I've got to like find 4 interesting people every fucking month to talk to. Like, how am I going to do that? And then once I started being open to it, there's way more interesting people around than I have time to interview, right? Or to have these conversations with. So it's never been a problem finding enough guests. And that's getting easier and easier because I'm getting pitched. I'm on some list somewhere and all these publicists are writing to me like, hey, I talked about this in the last one. I got a thing from a publicist saying, how would you like to interview Henry Kissinger about a book that he's involved with? And I'm like, fuck Henry Kissinger. But it's pretty crazy that some publicist somewhere thinks it's worth Henry Kissinger's time to come and talk to me, So that's cool in a way, but I'll bet I don't actually follow up on more than maybe 10% of those. Someone who's written a book about something that's actually interesting to me. So many of them are like, Navy SEALs advice on, how to start a business and, have perfect abs or something. Like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I was just curious because of what Anya was saying. You've done this for a long time. So there's a big YouTuber I watch who travels all around the world called Bold and Bankrupt. It's an incredible channel, and he just goes off with the cameras mostly in like ex-Soviet countries. But he was talking the other day about at some point this chapter will close for me and I want to move on to something else. And I was just curious if you'd ever thought, do you know what, there is a point for me where actually I will step away, or is it more of I'm just enjoying it right now. I'm not really trying to think too many steps ahead. I'll keep doing it because I enjoy it.
Yeah, I think more the latter. Occasionally I will think about like, maybe I should just give this up and do something else. But the thing is, the podcast doesn't take so much of my time that I can't do something else, right? I can travel and do the podcast. I can write another book and do the podcast. I can teach. I've thought about, for example, doing like an online writer's workshop kind of thing. I could do that and do the podcast. It's not an either or situation. So yeah, but like I said earlier, the things I try to have my life as organic and unconstrained as possible. No alarm clocks. Don't have to go to bed at a certain time every night. Location independent. I can be where I want to go. And so podcasting is the same. If the time comes where I'm just like, you know what, I'm kind of out of gas on this, or I have some health crisis and I'm in the hospital for, 3 months and I can't do it. Well, yeah, then I guess that'll be the end of it. Or if I die, I'll definitely stop. That'll be the last time you hear Carsey Blanton singing, "You're going to die one day." And then Anya will say, "And he did."
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, and obviously, I'm sure, Mike, you think about this too, as do I, as someone with a podcast, but a lot of people are kind of asking, like, how do you get over the nerves of hitting record, or where did you learn to be like a comfortable public speaker and a storyteller? And I think, and not to speak for you, but I think part of what makes this, able to last as long as it does is because it doesn't really feel like a job to you. Like for me, I feel like for me, the podcast is actually an excuse to have conversations with people that I would never be able to have conversations with otherwise, who I really admire and respect. And the podcast follows my own like authentic, totally, curiosity. I'm interested in this subject, like shit, I want to talk to these people about it. And the podcast enables me to do that. So it's not, I think people ask for advice about how to start a podcast if they're nervous or don't feel comfortable. Or I wonder if that's sort of asking the wrong question, because if you're not comfortable or it doesn't feel like an aligned part of your personality already, then it might not be the best choice.
Yeah. You get that a lot from people. Like, I want to do what you do. How do I arrange that? It's like, are you fucking kidding? Like, it's weird because it's like on the one side, you're like, yeah, I get why you want to do this because it's fucking awesome. But on the other side, it's like, you have to be so fucking lucky. I mean, I think my podcast in terms of audience is probably in the top 1%, right? And it's like the economy that, if I'm at the 99th percentile with 50,000 listeners or whatever, Rogan is, 99.9 with the million plus listeners. And the difference is massive, So it's like the difference between Elon Musk and your rich uncle. It's a huge difference, but they're both in the top 1%. It's really hard to make money from podcasting. I only make a few $1,000 a month, and that's with 50,000 listeners. Now, of course, I could tone it down and stop saying bad words and stop talking about sex so much and, have more corporate sponsors or whatever, those automatic ad sales things that they do. And I'm sure I can make a lot more money if I did that, but fuck that. That feels dirty. And I want someone who tunes into the podcast to feel welcome and not abused. So even the shit that I do, where it's like, please hit this button in the Amazon thing and, do this and do that. Even that, I can't do that every episode. There are a lot of episodes where I'm just like, no ads, no mom talking about the cottage, no, just pure content. And I'm not asking you for anything. And for me, that it needs to be like that most of the time. I have never understood why Joe Rogan was running ads on his podcast before the Spotify thing. Like, Joe, you don't need more money, dude. Like, you got all the money. You don't need to, the mattress company and the Squarespace and like, who gives a fuck? What's that cost? How I guess it doesn't make them feel as dirty as it makes me feel. That's my problem, not theirs. Somebody asked like what famous people I would be interested in having on the podcast. And I get asked that all the time. And it's an interesting thing because in most cases, their fame makes them less interesting to me as a guest because I already know what they're about. I already know what they're going to say. They do interviews all the time. They've told their story a million times. They know exactly what they're going to talk about. They know how to present it, and who gives a shit? But some exceptions. Jim Carrey. I would love to hang out with Jim Carrey because I think he's a guy who's like, been in that whole process, that whole fame thing, but he's really interested in going way, way deeper than that. So I would love to meet Jim Carrey. Russell Brand also. He's annoying sometimes to me. But Mike, maybe that's just because he's British and, you Brits can be fucking
really
annoying.
Fair.
But also Peter Gabriel, another Brit. I would love to sit down with Peter Gabriel and apologize for making him so uncomfortable when I last time I met him. But I think he's a great genius who moves beyond his particular art. You know, all of these guys, right? They're all, I mean, two of them comedians, one a musician, but they're so much more than what they're famous for. And so, yeah, I'd love to meet those guys. Esther Perel, I know Esther. I've done a podcast with Esther. So if you look in the archives, you can find, it was a live recording. It was me, Esther Perel, and Neil Strauss speaking at the Strand bookstore in New York. And I think there's a video of it too. And I remember I was wearing a hat because a few days before that, I had gone to a firing range with a friend of mine, and I shot his rifle, and the scope slammed me right in the forehead. So I had like a third eye when I did that thing with Esther and Neil. And that was, I think, we were participating in the launch of Neil's book, The Truth. And so that was the event there. That was pretty cool.
I think it's, several people have said this, and I think it's an interesting point, like saying you should interview more people you disagree with. And maybe this is just because I talk to you so much about the podcast that you do. And I feel like you interview a lot of people you disagree with, but don't necessarily make the disagreements the focus of the podcast, or at least in the sense that you don't make arguments the focus of the podcast. And I always sort of wonder this myself with podcast guests, because of course I don't agree 100% with anyone that I've had on the show, but I always find it to be like more meaningful to find common ground and even sort of gently express disagreements or varying viewpoints without it becoming a debate or an argument, which I've always found to be like really not interesting and nerve-wracking and anxiety producing. And I think it's so fascinating that people think that we like don't have anyone on our podcast who we disagree with. And I would argue I probably disagree with 98% of the people I have on to some extent. And you too, I imagine.
Yeah. And also it's hard because like some of the stuff that I would disagree with people about is stuff that I have studied a lot, like human prehistory, right? Human sexuality. So when someone says, you know, in the midst of making a larger point, someone says, everyone died at 35 in 20,000 years ago and blah, blah, blah. And they go on. There's a part of me that wants to be like, hey, hold up. Sorry, I've been studying prehistory for 20 years. That's total bullshit. You're totally wrong about that. But that wasn't their main point. They were trying to make another point, and that was just something they threw in. And my audience has heard me say that shit many times. If they've read either of the books I've written, they know, I've talked about that in both books. So I kind of feel like I don't need to get into that kind of a thing. Because the vast majority of the people listening already know what I think about that. They already know my perspectives on that. So then it becomes like a big dick swinging kind of thing. And I don't need to be doing that. So I want people who come on my podcast to feel welcome and to feel comfortable. And what I'm really interested in is kind of like putting someone in the best possible light. I feel like it's inviting someone to a party. And the last thing I want to do is invite someone to a party and then make them feel bad for having come to my party, So yeah, I'm not, like I said, I'm not a journalist. So I'm not trying to get into that, hard hitting, confrontational kind of interview. I love that. I mean, Mehdi Hassan, for example, who's sort of a transatlantic personality at this point, I think is excellent at that. And he does a really good job of it. That's not my thing. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to have a good conversation with someone and then share it with people that I was going to say that I love, but people that I want to be at the party with us. I want someone looking at the poster, laughing and enjoying their ice cream, you know?
I was going to say, it comes back to what you were saying earlier as well, isn't it? It's like that's not clearly in your nature to have these big debates with people. You obviously can do it, but you're not going to get out of bed and enjoy doing that every day. So it makes sense that you do it the way you do it. And that's what I think the audience loves as well, isn't it? It's that it comes back to being that authentic self. Again, that's who you are. So yeah, so that makes sense. I always do think how you would handle some of these debates. I'd love to see you, like, with some people you do, like, there is a part of thinking, oh, I would like to see Chris argue against one of these people with very different opinions. And actually, I did actually ask one of my friends if they had a question for you. Is there anything that you've learned in the last 5 years that's shifted your perspective on something, where you were quite firm down one camp and now you've actually gone, do you know what, I've actually changed my mind? Does anything come to mind to you there where you've kind of tweaked your thinking at all?
Oh, wow. I'm sure there are many things, but it's not the kind of thing that I, put a bookmark in it. And I don't know, Anya, do you, can you think of anything I've changed my mind on in the last few years?
No, I don't know. But I think the not putting a bookmark thing in it, I mean, I kind of think this speaks to some of the conversations that we have a lot about identity, right? And that, like, there's a difference between forming an identity around an idea or an opinion, and then just like having an opinion or an idea from time to time that then kind of morphs. And I think there's a problem in society nowadays, which I think is fueling a lot of the debates that we're having, where people are saying, like, I believe XYZ about the government, and I'm going to find other people that feel the same way, and then sort of like attach myself to an ideology and an identitarian movement right around this belief. Whereas I mean, I can definitely cite things too, but for me, it's always felt far more fluid, as I'm sure it has for you. Like, it's hard to see where you change something because you didn't necessarily drive the flag into the earth to begin with, to say, like, this is who I am and this is what I believe. It feels far more interesting, at least to me, to be kind of evolving and fluid. And like, shit, if I stuck to what I thought was true or what most interested me, 15 years ago, like, I wouldn't have much of a life and would be exceptionally stifled. So I think people just dig their heels in too much, and then it becomes really embarrassing to say, like, oh shit, actually I was wrong about that, or I've changed my mind, or that's no longer a huge priority for me. I mean, actually, I have an idea. I think someone asked where you think you will be, not specific to the podcast, but in general, 5 to 10 years from now. And I do feel like you're kind of struggling with or grappling this idea of continuing to move and continuing to be kind of a free spirit traveler versus, like, do I want a place to land and put my stuff and not have to move all the time? And I think that's sort of been a lifelong shift for you that is still shifting, but maybe something.
Yeah. And that's a good example, right? Where, like, often I'll think, like, oh, I want to build a house and have a place and, cultivate that kind of community. But, it depends on this and that and the other thing. And I'm sort of, waiting for different things to line up. So as you said, it's not like planting a flag. I mean, maybe one of the big things that I think about is, like, I thought Obama was awesome. I thought when Obama was elected, I thought, like, fuck yeah. Hey, the world is getting its shit together, right? Like, hey, Nobel Peace Prize winning, fucking cool dude with a great jump shot and a sexy wife and daughters who love him. And, like, yeah, a good guy running the country. Like, I love America again, and then it's like, oh, wait, but he's arresting all these whistleblowers, but he says he wants openness, and he's increasing the drone strikes, and he's, doing more persecutions of illegal aliens. And it's like, what the fuck, dude? Like, I thought you were cool, and you're not. You're just a fucking corporate personality. Fuck. So I was really wrong about that, and it makes me really sad. I'm done.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to kind of be that. I think isn't that the point of politics, really? I mean, I get really frustrated too at, people like Bernie, for example, who I think have the best of intentions, but don't realize that the whole thing is a circus and a game. And like, we all have to play the game in such a way in order to, I don't know, gain control or not. We're all fucked. That's the answer.
Yeah. Yeah. A few people have asked about Brett Weinstein's new book. I've not read it. I don't intend to read it. I find Brett and his wife to be annoying, and I'm not really, I mean, this gets into the whole thing of, confrontational interviews and stuff. They were on Rogan at one point, and apparently they said that they thought Sex at Dawn was total bullshit and scientifically invalid, and that I wrote it in order to get laid. This is what people told me. I never watched it. And so it's like, any sort of interaction with them is going to be annoying to me. And I don't like, there's a smug certainty that they have, and that a lot of those people in that dark web or whatever it's called, that community, the Steven Pinkers of the world, there's this kind of like, if you don't agree with me, it's because you're not smart enough to understand what I'm saying. I have no time for that. So Mike, you were saying, I wonder how Chris would, debate people. If I'm debating someone who begins the debate with the possibility that they're going to learn something from me, that I might be right about some things and they might be wrong about some things, then I'm down. And we can have fun and it can be cool, and I'll be super respectful and, make jokes at my own expense. And I'm, more interested in having a good time and maybe, making some friends. But if I get emails all the time, and I've been interviewed by people who begin with the certainty that I have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about, and that I'm totally wrong, I'm totally full of shit, and I wrote a book to get laid. Like, dude, I was getting laid way before I wrote a book. There's zero reason to write a book to get laid. But I'm not interested in that, because I don't want to argue with a true believer about their belief system. Yeah, there's nothing to be gained. It's just going to be a really unpleasant experience and frustrating, and it's just going to generate a lot of negative hormones in my bloodstream that I don't need. So I don't engage in that kind of thing, honestly.
It's just you can't, I feel like when I was younger, and I quite a bit younger, like 12, and found out my dad was gay, and all of a sudden got infuriated by all the fundamentalist Christians on the streets with like anti-gay signs, and really felt like I was going to go up to them and debate them and change their mind. And like, that was a valid feeling at the time, but it was incredibly naive, obviously. And how much time do we waste by trying to convince people of something different? And I think that's the other problem with having people on who, like Pinker or the Weinsteins, like they're already set in their beliefs. And you can hear Sam Harris, you can hear this in the way that they talk about what they think and how they believe, and they put down anyone else who disagrees with them. And it's like, I don't need to subject myself to the energy suck that it would be to try to convince them. I mean, they're not even going to listen to it. So what's the point?
Right.
Like, I'd rather have a conversation with someone that's kind of like more flexible or fluid in their beliefs, and then we can actually have a discussion. Changing someone's mind or arguing or disagreeing is not at all the point. It's sort of just like, it's like a genuine curiosity for each other.
I like conversations in which it feels like we're both refining and growing our understanding thanks to what we're doing together. So it's not a conflict. It's more like the kind of very friendly struggle that you get when you're studying jujitsu or aikido or something else, where you are working against someone, but in only in a way that you're trying to help them learn the move and they're trying to help you learn the move. So it's more of a dance than a death struggle, you know? And I mean, when I was younger, like what you were describing, Anya, I cared. I wanted people to agree with me. I wanted people to know that what I believed was really fucking important. And I got to a certain age where it's like, I don't care if people agree with me. It has absolutely no value to me. So, yeah, I don't care really about that. Hey, we need to wrap this up. We've been going for an hour and a half, and I'm scheduled to record a podcast in half an hour across town. So
you need to get
it
moving.
occurs.
I'm just reminded of a very quick quote, which was bees don't waste their time trying to convince honeys, even nodding that, you know, convince flies that honey is better than shit. Yeah. So
Exactly.
it reminded me of, I butchered that quote, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good quote. I saw that. I think you posted that or something. I've thought about that ever since.
Yeah. Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure, and congratulations on 500 to go back to where we started.
Thank you.
And here's to the next 500 as well.
We'll see, man. And definitely one of them has to be with you. We had a really good, I mean, I'm glad we're going to let it sit for a while, so we're not consciously repeating the conversation. Yes. But I do remember really being interested in your experiences on the Camino, and you know, the big change in your life and all that kind of stuff is quite inspiring.
Yeah, big stories to share there. Spoiler alert. Sorry, Anya, go ahead.
No, good. No, I was just going to say thank you to everyone putting up with like a half an hour of technical ridiculousness and finally joining us and having hope that we'd figure it out.
We went at least half an hour longer than we were expecting to. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, everybody. Heather Ann, Jordan, Sarah, Pink Flamingo, everybody who's been chatting, and I hope you guys figure out a way to get to know each other. I saw people were posting where they were in the world. So if you're in the same town, trust me, you're cool people. You should get together and have a beer or something. All right.